This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hey, very good morning to you. It is Saturday, the 6th of July, 2024, and we are talking endings. I have just left my school after 12 years, and we're going to talk about what that process has been like, how my final week has gone, and what it is to not go back to the same school in September.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Yes, good morning. It is, as I've said, Saturday the 6th of July. We have got a slightly different setup here in the Saturday Breakfast studio this morning. Not that it really makes much of a difference to you guys. Hopefully you can all hear me. That is why I'm mentioning my new setup, is because I have had a very stressful hour. I always get stressed whenever I change anything here in the studio. Because I've gone over the past couple of years since I took Saturday morning breakfast on. I've gone through a couple of iterations of the studio, different ways that I want my setup to be, in order to kind of facilitate the flow of everything. I think we all do this, don't we? You know, you want to change how your classroom looks, you want to change how your home office looks. You just want everything to flow as easily as possible. And I've got myself into a good groove over the past couple of years, I think, with how everything is working, with how my setup goes. But then the reason that everything has been kind of so smooth is that I've been using my work computer to broadcast. I feel like I can admit that now. Just because it was easier, it was very straightforward, and I was very lucky in that my school recently invested in a whole bunch of tablet computers for us, and so I knew that it was kind of up to date, top of the line. So I've been using that, and clearly it's gone quite well, because we haven't had any major technical difficulties over the past couple of years, at least not from a computing perspective. But then, as I mentioned in the jingle today, I have now left my school, which meant yesterday I had to hand my computer back in. And so that now is not here. It is sitting locked away in the IT office. So we bid a fond farewell to what has been the hub of Saturday Breakfast for the past 2 years. And we have got a relatively improvised setup at the moment, I must say. So what I've got my Mac Mini balanced on top of my dehumidifier, which I'm already seeing is not a good idea. And it shouldn't be balanced on top of the dehumidifier, that's not where it lives. But unfortunately, the headphone jack to my microphone doesn't stretch far enough for me to be able to sit here with the Mac Mini in its place and still be able to actually hear when the opening jingle, when the news has finished. So, I could have just left it in place and had everything in, beautifully tidy, and then you just had like dead air for 5 minutes while I was blissfully unaware that things had ended. Or I could move things around, which I have done. It doesn't look very tidy. It really doesn't look very tidy. I'm going to get in so much trouble. But I have got some time. I have got some time to tidy up, because this is my last show for the summer, in inverted commas. I am taking a few weeks off after today while I'm in the US. So this is our only show in July, but I will be back with you whatever that first Saturday is after the 7th of August. So what's that going to be? 7, 8, 9, like the 10th or the 11th, whatever that is. I will be back with you as normal. So, I will be able to hopefully get my setup sorted over the weekend so that when we come back and we pick up steam again at the beginning of August, we are good to go. But it does seem to be that everything is working. I know at least that Podbean is working all right because I can see people, and I haven't had Tom, who I can see is here in the show today. He isn't frantically messaging me in Slack to tell me that he can't hear anything. So I'm assuming that we are all good, which is a relief. It is a relief. But I suppose this is kind of like a little microcosm of what we're talking about today. The fact that things change. And sometimes even something that seems like a little change, such as the device that I am using to broadcast the show today, it can become a big change. It can feel like a big change. And as we kind of move into what is a huge time of change for certainly here in the United Kingdom, given the results of our election yesterday, we're not a politically focused show here on Saturday Morning Breakfast, so I'm not going to go too much into that. But, a change of government is always a big time of change. We are entering the summer, again, recognising my privilege about the fact that I have started my summer already. My apologies to my colleagues who have still got a couple more weeks to battle through. You can do it. I believe that you can do it. And so that's a nice change. And then, of course, so many of us will be leaving current schools, moving on to new schools, and that's always a big change. And that's what the show is about today. So because I have just, after 12 years, left I still want to say my current school, and I'm going to say my current school for two reasons: to ease that transition, like mentally for me, number one, but also because I am still technically employed by them through the end of August. So I have left my current school where I've been for 12 years, which is insane. And I am moving on to a new adventure, still in teaching, that I will tell you all about. But I kind of want to, it's a bit self-indulgent. I know that it's self-indulgent. But this is my breakfast, so I can be self-indulgent. We're going to talk today kind of about my experiences of changing schools, my experience of what it was to leave my current school, the kind of process that I've been through. I've done a little bit of recording through the week of my thoughts and my feelings, so we'll kind of reflect on those, and we're just going to have a chat about what it is to move on, what it is to start a new chapter. So if you would like to be part of the discussion this morning, please do. I always welcome your thoughts and ideas. If you are listening live in the Podbean app, you can text me and I will read your messages out live on air and we can engage that way. If you are listening live elsewhere, or you are not listening live at all, if it is no longer the 9 minutes past 9 on the 6th of July 2024 for you, you can tweet me, because as I say every week, I am always interested, I am perennially interested in the topics that I talk about here on Saturday Morning Breakfast, so I will always want to engage with you on them. Oh, I thought that was going to be such a slick transition.
Hi teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.com. teachradio.org. Imagine having your own instructional coach available 24/7. Now you can with the Teaching How-Tos platform. This highly personalised social platform empowers busy teachers to learn and apply evidence-based teaching techniques, either independently, working collaboratively with their peers, or with our new AI assistant. The platform features over 160 visual guides to teaching techniques, designed to help you quickly and easily implement high-impact practices that boost student engagement and improve learning outcomes. Join over 200 institutions worldwide that are elevating their teaching practices with the How-To app. No gurus, just practical support anytime you need it. Interested in finding out more? Visit teachinghowtos.com and register for our next webinar.
Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Watch sessions by thought leaders in education, literacy experts, and EdTech specialists from the International Reading Conference for free. The lineup included renowned speakers such as TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui and beloved children's author Michael Rosen. The three-day conference explored a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Sign up to receive the recordings for free by visiting the Reading Solutions UK website at readingsolutions.uk.co.uk.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out! Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading!
This is your Teachers Talk Radio News for the week ending the 6th of July. Times Education Supplement reports that 6 of the 11 specialist maths schools have been delayed, prompting head teachers to wonder whether the millions spent so far might have been better spent at existing sixth forms. The Specialist Maths Schools program began in 2019. Each specialist maths school was set up by a multi-academy trust and linked to a university, and were designed to increase the number of graduates studying maths and science subjects. However, the date at which these schools are due to open has increasingly slipped into the future, as problems with finding sites and completing planning have led to increasing delays. A new Labour government has indicated that they will replace the single-word Ofsted judgments with a report card system, and have outlined 9 principles on which these report cards will be based. The 9 include a new emphasis on special educational needs, a flexible approach which takes into account the special circumstances of individual schools, and collaboration in school improvement between groups of schools. A time frame for the new system has yet to be announced. The new Children's Laureate, Frank Cotterell Boyce, begins his 2-year tenure in the role. He stated that during this period, he wants to demonstrate that making children's lives better by increasing their access to books and reading, which he calls the apparatus of happiness, is critical to the prospects of generations to come. And he's adamant that the research backs him up. There's nothing speculative about this, he said. We've got the figures, and we've had them for 25 years, and what a difference reading for pleasure and reading together makes for the life chances of children. Research by the organisation Teacher Tab have shown some worrying trends in the relationship between parents and schools. While 85% of primary school teachers indicated that they had a positive relationship with parents and home, only 46% of secondary school teachers said they had the same. and a quarter of secondary school teachers and 30% of primary school teachers indicated they've ignored pupil misbehaviour out of fear of a kickback on social media. And 1 in 5 teachers have experienced abusive emails or messages from parents. And 1 in 5 teachers have also indicated that they've been subject to verbal abuse from parents. And 2/3 of primary teachers say they've never had any training on managing parental relationships. With the Labour Party's commitment to extend voting to 16-year-olds and above, the publication Children and Young People Now have called for stronger political education to be offered in schools. Since, while votes for 16-year-olds remains widely popular among that age group, they also are the least likely to vote. Looking back on the last 14 years of Conservative government rule, the investigative journalist Warwick Mansell, in his online newspaper Education Uncovered, compiled a list of the 10 most egregious scandals in education over the last 14 years. These included such things as the lack of transparency in funding of multi-academy trusts, the payment of executives, and of course, the disastrous handling of the pandemic and qualifications. But above all, of the 10 scandals, the number 1 scandal was evidence that Ofsted had made up research findings in order to support its political agenda. In one case, Professor Mark Boylan of Sheffield Hallam University told Schools Week that he was astonished to find Ofsted citing research that he'd never carried out. And Professor Mike Askew, former president of the Mathematical Association, accused Ofsted of a complete fabrication in relation to the work he'd carried out with fellow academics, which was cited in an Ofsted report. This week, the BBC reported that a giant blanket made by parents of pupils who've been excluded from primary and secondary schools has been officially unveiled. The crocheted blanket was made from 2,999 pieces of fabric, which represents the number of children who were excluded on average each school day in 2021 to 22. Dr. Sarah Martin Denham from the University of Sunderland, who led the project, said it had brought the community together in a way that is wholesome and empathetic. The blanket will now go on a year-long tour of schools and community groups in England to raise awareness of this issue. And finally, Professor Lee Elliott Major, Britain's first Professor of Social Mobility, has tweeted that should Keir Starmer become Prime Minister, he will be the first Prime Minister since the Second World War who didn't obtain his first degree from Oxford University. Starmer went to Leeds University and he's the son of a toolmaker. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News, read by John Gibbs.
Thank you, John. Fascinating as always, and a little bit disappointing, because in probably the most poorly timed thing that I have done in a while, just as John was talking about allegations against Ofsted for fabricating research, I opened up the piece of research that I want to base this next portion of the show around. And as an academic person, that makes me really sad. Maybe it should make me angry. Maybe it should make me annoyed. But if anything, it makes me sad. Because I think if these allegations are true, then Ofsted has contributed towards the de-intellectualization of our education system. It is, let's be honest, it is already difficult for teachers to engage with research because of various factors. It's quite often difficult to get hold of if you are not affiliated with the university. So much research is locked behind a paywall. It is quite often lengthy, and so you don't have the time to sit down and digest it as a teacher because you've got a million and one other things to do. But I always feel that teaching has this golden opportunity to be such a research-informed profession in the same way that healthcare is, particularly nursing. As long-term friends of the show will know, I'm currently doing my doctorate in education, so of course this is something that I'm going to be very passionate about and that I will have a bias towards. But in doing the research for my assignments and for my thesis, what I'm finding is that a lot of the research I'm using comes from the field of nursing because there is such a rich evidence base there. And I feel like there can be such a rich evidence base for education. And I feel like there should be a rich evidence base for education. Because what are academics if not educators? What are academics if not people who want to create and disseminate knowledge? And so I quite often find this disconnect between academia, between universities and research and all of that sort of thing, and schools, to be ridiculous, quite honestly. So to then have suggestion that the Office for Standards in Education is either fabricating or misciting or whatever it might be research undermines the role of research. It undermines the importance of educational research. And I just think that's really sad, because I think that research not only has a place in education, in teaching, I think it should be fundamental. I think it should be central to what we do. I think everything should be research and evidence informed. Because let's not forget what academic research is. Academic research is quite often going into a workplace and observing people, talking to people, finding things out through your interactions with other people, and then pulling those ideas together. And what do teachers do year on year in their own classrooms in order to improve their practice? They reflect on their past experiences. Whether we want to admit it or not, pretty much everything that we do that informs our practice as experienced classroom teachers is action research, because you are using your own prior experiences to form your current practice, to inform your current practice, to change your current practice. And I think if we could just make that connection, and if we could go, oh, actually, I am engaging in research, albeit on a very small scale where I'm just researching my own practice with my own students in my own classroom, then maybe we could start easing that transition. That's my word of the day today, is transition, clearly, between what we're doing in the classroom and what non-classroom based researchers are doing in the universities through their research, and what those of us who are bridging the gap between the two, those of us who are classroom based researchers, are doing in order to make our profession better. So I don't know whether these allegations towards Ofsted are true. At the moment, from what I want to say, it doesn't matter whether or not they're true. The fact that they have been made in and of itself is quite undermining towards research, towards improving practice through collaborative knowledge. And I think it's important to try and mitigate that damage by reinforcing the importance of this research. So this research that I want to start with is a piece of desk research by Rebecca Allen and Simon Burgess, who looked at the school workforce census data from 2010. So it's quite old data now. But still useful, always useful. And they sat down and they looked at how long, on average, teachers stay in one particular school. So this isn't in the profession, and the show today isn't about how long teachers remain teachers. It's about how long people stay in one specific school. And their conclusion is that in general, teaching is a relatively high turnover profession, and that the stereotype of retention of teachers in deprived schools versus retention of teachers in non-deprived schools is true, but not to the extent that we might think. So they say that in a typical school, just an average run-of-the-mill school, about 20% of the teaching staff have been there for under 2 years, and over 50% of the teaching staff have been there for under 5 years. On the other side of that, 20% have been there for at least 10, and over 5% have been there for at least 20. So there is quite a large range within schools, but we can't ignore the fact that over 50% of those teachers, over half of the teachers, will have been there for under 5 years. And I quite often think, I was talking to a colleague of mine yesterday about this, I quite often think about what that means for the culture of a school. If you've got a school where staff do not stay long enough to kind of become embedded, if staff are turning over very, very quickly, how does that impact a school's culture? How does that impact what a school is, the character of a school? Because you end up having lots of teachers coming in, learning the routines, learning the structures, learning the rules, kind of getting to grips with what the school is, and then moving on. And so you have more new teachers coming in to learn the routines, learn the structures, etc., etc. So I wonder, because I'm quite interested in school identity, in how schools kind of define themselves and what a school would say it is as a school. And so I wonder how schools with a relatively high turnover of short-staying staff go about creating a sense of cohesion, who go about creating a sense of school identity, when you've got pupils who have been there longer than most of the teaching staff have. Which is not to say that they don't. And, it's not necessary to say that schools with a high turnover where teachers stay, 5 years before moving on are bad. Because, of course, we know that incoming teachers will bring knowledge, they will bring expertise, they will bring ideas from their previous schools, or if they're ECTs from their previous placements, into the new school in order to maybe streamline things, maybe improve things. But I do wonder what it means for trying to create some kind of cohesive culture of belonging, of what it means to be a member of School X. Averaging all teachers, the mean time to spend in one school is 6.7 school years. So on average, a teacher will spend approximately 7 years in a school, which is it's a respectable amount of time, isn't it? If you are in secondary, it's enough to greet a year 7 class, see them all the way through to their A-levels, and then be ready to move on. If you are in primary, it means, again, that you could see a reception class going through year 6 and then be ready to move on. But what's interesting to me about this is that completed tenure, so the completed amount of time in one school, is double that of the average elapsed tenure. So generally, people stay in schools longer than they don't, which I think is a good thing. I do think that is a very positive thing. If we look then, like Alan and Burgess do, at the difference between advantaged and disadvantaged schools, or disadvantaged schools and non-disadvantaged schools, or the least disadvantaged schools and the most disadvantaged schools, however you want to put it. The differences are in fact very, very small. In the least disadvantaged schools that they researched, 18% of teachers had a tenure of 0 to 2 years, compared to 22% of teachers in the most disadvantaged schools. So that's much smaller a difference than we might be led to believe. Because people will say, oh, working in a disadvantaged school is tough, and it is, and so that leads to high turnover. But actually, it doesn't lead to much higher turnover than in other types of schools, and generally it's on par with the average, because remember, in a typical school, 20% have been there for less than 2 years, fewer than 2 years. So of course, the tenure in these most disadvantaged schools, that's going to affect the average and all of that sort of thing. But actually, the perceived disadvantagedness of schools is quite minimal when it comes to staff turnover. What is interesting, though, is that more disadvantaged schools, poorer schools, tend to have the highest rate of younger and inexperienced teachers, which again makes sense because, as we all know, and as we all talk about at this time of year, the more experienced you are, the higher up the pay scale you are, the more expensive you are, and so the less likely a school is to be able to afford you. So it kind of makes sense that poorer schools have a higher proportion of younger and inexperienced teachers, because they are lower down the pay scale, and so they are cheaper. Good morning, Paul. Good to have you here again. Our topic this morning is moving on. We are talking about that change of schools, because I have this week left my school, and we're kind of just talking about what it is to make that change, to make that jump from one place to another. So yeah, I mean, Alan and Burgess suggests that there is more research to be done in terms of why these disadvantaged schools have a higher turnover than the non-disadvantaged schools. But I think ultimately it's going to be a financial decision, isn't it? It's going to be because the lower down the pay scale you are, the cheaper you are. Therefore, the more attractive you are as an employee to a school whose budget is already very, very tight. But to me, the most interesting thing about this whole article, I will tweet this article out at the end, it's very well written, very accessible. So if you are a teacher who doesn't like to engage with the research because you find it a bit dense, a bit of a slog to get through, this actually, it kind of reads a bit like a magazine article, to be honest, so it's quite an easy read. But what I found most interesting was this table that they've published at the end that looks at years in current school in percentage, and they've broken it down into all kinds of demographics. So the stats that they've given us is that of all teachers, 19.4% will have spent 0 to 2 years in their school. 36.8% have spent 2 to 5 years. 24.8% have spent 5 to 10 years. And 18.9% have spent 10 years or more. And to me, it was that or more that is very interesting, because as somebody who has just left his school after 12 years, I fall into that or more category. And I would be really interested to know how long that or more lasts. Do we have many teachers these days who have been in their school for pretty much their entire career? Do we find ourselves encouraged to move on? I remember being at uni for my initial teacher training, for my B.Ed, and I was advised that we should move on from schools every 5 or 6 years. And we were told that as part of our training. And again, I remember thinking at the time, and clearly 20-something years later, my mindset hasn't shifted on this. I remember thinking how sad that is, that we're being advised as part of our career progression to change schools instead of finding the one that suits us and working to make that school the very, very best school that it can be. I don't know. There is to me just something sad about that. But then I admit I'm quite a soppy, sentimental person. So if I find somewhere that I like, I am going to stay there. It's the reason that I've been at my current school, the school that I've just left, for 12 years. I always say I was only going to be there till Christmas. I was going to tell this story a bit later on in the show, but I'll tell you now. I had left my school, my previous school, where I was a primary teacher and I was the MFL teacher. So I taught year 6. I did a lot of supply there, and I was the French teacher, and then I did Japanese as an extracurricular activity. And I was there for 5 years, and I moved on. And then I was running out of money. So I took my current job on a very short-term understanding. I was hired because the head of department was the parent of somebody in the year 6 class I had just left. So she knew who I was as a teacher. She knew what my practice was like. She knew my subject knowledge and all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, I was only going to stay for a few months. And then between liking it and the fear of the unknown and being comfortable, I suppose, I didn't move on. And then here we were 12 years later when I realised it was time. So yeah, it's quite interesting to me. It's quite interesting to me how long that or more might be. And this idea that we are being encouraged to move on quickly. This idea that it's bad practice to stay for somewhere too long. In terms of gender breakdown, and again, remembering that this research is from the census data in autumn 2010. So when it comes to assigning gender, the only options that these teachers were given were male and female. 20.4% in the 0 to 2 years category were male versus 19.2 female. In the 2 to 5 years, it was 37 male and 36.7 female. In the 5 to 10 years, 23.5 male and 25.2 female. And then 10 years or more, 19.1 male and 18.9 female. What is interesting about that is that in the raw numbers, more teachers were identifying as female than male. So on average, gender doesn't seem to make much of a difference in terms of how long someone is going to stay somewhere. And again, that I find very interesting, particularly if we compare it to stats against career progression. I don't have any of those to hand, but one thing that I have noticed is that it's very rare, I think, for teachers to kind of climb the ladder in their current school. You can kind of get so far up the ladder, you might be able to become, I don't know, a head of year, a head of key stage, whatever it might be. But then if you want to make that jump into senior leadership, if you want to make that jump into deputy headship, you are likely going to have to change schools unless you are fortunate enough that a deputy head or a head in your current setting is moving on. Again, that opens up a whole interesting can of worms, in my opinion, about what leadership does to create and sustain culture in a school. My current doctoral essay is about culture, so if you're wondering why I'm so obsessed with culture at the moment, that's why. And kind of what it means for incoming heads and incoming deputies to either adapt to an existent school culture or to change it. Now remember, as I've talked about on the show before, there is no discrete independent model of educational leadership. The educational leadership model that we have in this country and that we follow is taken wholesale from business and kind of shoved on top of education. And so generally, it is expected that head teachers will remain head teachers of their current school for under 10 years. And then they will be, they should, in inverted commas, for their own career progression, move on. So it is interesting to me, given that we know that there is a gender disparity in senior leadership, it is interesting to me that there is very little difference in terms of tenure split between gender. We also, interestingly, see very little difference split between primary and secondary. So the percentages in 0 to 2 years were 19.5% at primary and 19.4% at secondary. 2 to 5, 36.6 primary, 37 on the nose secondary. 5 to 10, 24.8 for both, which I quite liked. And then 10 or more, 19.1% primary, 18.8% secondary. So as we can see, there are no actual discernible demographic reasons for the length of somebody's tenure. So you've got to think a lot about what it is then that drives somebody to leave a school. And quite often it is career progression. It is promotion. It is, as I've said, wanting to become a head of department, wanting to become a senior leader, and those opportunities not existing in your current setting. And so moving on to find them, which is, a perfectly serviceable, perfectly good thing. For me, if I'm really honest, I don't know why I've left my current school. It's been a bit of a strange time. As you know, I have been teaching in an independent school, and all independent schools are very concerned about Labour's proposal to introduce VAT. I'm not going to discuss whether or not I think that's a good idea, because that's not what we're here to talk about today. But I do think it's important, particularly for state sector colleagues, to know that this has caused disquiet amongst teachers in the independent sector. I think a lot of us are thinking about our futures, not because our schools are saying, oh, you're going to have to be made redundant, oh, we're cutting your subject. I know that all independent schools right now are undergoing consultation to see what they can do to save the school while paying the VAT if it's introduced. But at an individual teacher level, people are thinking about their own futures, because, you know, we are being bombarded in the news, we're being shown on Twitter about how, you know, this VAT is coming in, and it's going to be, you know, the end of so many independent schools. And so I think maybe part of me, not consciously but subconsciously, I think that has kind of affected my mindset over the last, probably the last 12 months, where I've been kind of thinking about my own career progression. And again, you know, my school has at no point suggested that jobs are at risk. My school has not suggested that that I specifically am at any kind of risk. But I think, you know, I have had to think about, well, what happens if? And I think lots of us have had to think about what happens if. I'm also aware that I am somebody who kind of thrives with a bit of a portfolio career. In case I haven't mentioned this, because I know that I don't talk about it very often, I have a background in theatre. So, you know, I've done musicals, I've done Shakespeare, I've done all sorts of acting professionally. And as an actor, you get used to what we euphemistically call rest time. That time where a show ends and you are unemployed. And it's always very scary because you haven't got any money coming in. But you do kind of get used to it. And, you know, you do start taking on other work, other commitments to either earn some money or fill the time. And that is kind of a mentality that I have brought with me into teaching. And I found myself in my school wearing lots of different hats, taking on lots of different roles, because I am quite good at juggling that. You know, I'm experienced in juggling that. And I like the variety that it gives. So, you know, in just within my subject, I teach almost all of the languages that my school offers. I don't teach Spanish, but I do teach the others and more. I offer other subjects as extracurriculars. I have done some private tutoring on the side. I write books. I write resources. I am here with you almost every Saturday morning. I used to be in charge of the American entrance exams at my school. I was in charge of entering our international students for exams in their native languages. I've done all sorts. And I think that for the past couple of years, where my focus has kind of been on just my classroom practice, I've realised that I need that variety. I kind of need to be able to do lots of different things. And again, my school has never stopped me. My school has been, excuse me, has been very good at encouraging me to do things outside of the school setting, particularly where they benefit my practice in school. So being here with you, you know, all of the research that I do, all of the teachers that I talk to in preparation for the show every Saturday, that benefits my practice. It makes me a better teacher, which in turn benefits the school. The exams that I've marked has benefited the school because I understand my mark schemes a lot better. So again, you know, my school has always been very, very understanding of that. But I think just where, for me personally, things have quietened down over the past couple of years, I've done a few more talks. I've obviously had the show, but my publications have kind of slowed right down over the past couple of years, and other bits and bobs have stopped, where I've been kind of deliberately focused a bit more on my classroom practice. And I think I kind of realised that I at least need to try going back to that kind of portfolio offering. And actually, education is such good um, a good playground for that, because I can do this show, I can write textbooks, I can make resources, I can carry on with my doctorate, I can run CPD. There is all sorts of things that I can do, that we can do as educators, that don't involve being in the classroom 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as it seems sometimes. So I think that's been playing on my mind a little bit lately. I think that maybe after 12 years, it was just a bit of a time for a change, because I think you can get very, very comfortable somewhere. I think you can get a bit too comfortable somewhere sometimes, which stops progression. And I'm somebody, I always like to be developing. I don't necessarily want the linear progression in teaching, and that's something I've talked about this on the show before. That's something that really annoys me. The fact that in order to progress, in inverted commas, as a teacher, you've got to climb that ladder. You've got to become a head of department. He says, ironically, having just taken the job as a head of department. You've got to become a senior leader. You've got to become a head. And there is very little progression for those of us who actually like teaching. And who wants to stay in the classroom, because most career progression, again, because we don't have a model just for education, we've taken it from business. Most career progression takes you out of the classroom, which is why the vast majority of us became teachers in the first place. And so I think, for me, as I've been thinking, let's be honest, as I've been nearing my midlife crisis, as I mentioned last week, I turned 39 at the beginning of June, so 40 is looming. And as I'm sitting here going, what have I done with my life? And what am I going to do with the rest of it? I've been thinking about how I want my career to progress. And I've very honestly been thinking, I don't want that ladder. I don't want to become a deputy head. I don't want to become a head teacher, because I have seen the responsibilities that they have to shoulder. I have seen the nonsense that they have to deal with, and that is absolutely not for me. But it means that I need to create my own career progression, because it doesn't exist naturally in our profession for teachers like me. And there are a lot of us. There are a lot of us. I've spoken to a lot of middle managers over the past few weeks as I've been preparing for my own transition into being a head of department. I've been talking to people, I've been getting advice, and so many of them have said that they don't want to make that next step into senior leadership because they don't want to leave their classroom and their subjects behind. And so I think one thing that we do need to look at, particularly if we're thinking about the retention crisis, is what career progression can look like for those of us that don't want to go into senior leadership. How can we still progress but remain teachers? I think that's something that's really important. So for me, that progression is, again, it's going to look like staying in school, because I don't want to be one of those people that comes in and does CPD and tells you how to teach but hasn't actually taught for 5 years, 10 years, whatever it might be. I want to remain at the chalk face, albeit the cyber chalk face for now, because my new big role is online. But I am now a head of department. I'm head of classics. At the moment, we only offer Latin. But I am looking to grow that. I'm looking at introducing classical civ and Greek, which is really, really exciting. And for me, that is progression. For me, that is taking, my department and making it bigger, making it better, giving these opportunities to students who have not had them before. And so that's really, really exciting. So yeah, I found myself not really sure why, still not really sure why. I found myself back in April handing in my notice. And I think I was in denial about it, quite honestly. Because I then didn't really take it very seriously. Now, that's, again, kind of ironic, isn't it? Because I've done a lot of shows lately about going for interviews. You know that I've been going for interviews. And so I have been. And, I've scored, again, a few different jobs that I can combine into a teaching career. But I think it was more of an intellectual exercise. It was like I knew that I would need new jobs for September, but I hadn't kind of internalized it. I hadn't really made that link between I'm applying for a new job and that means that I'm leaving my current school. And I'm still not entirely sure that I have internalized the fact that I won't be going back to it. Despite having walked off of campus for the very last time yesterday lunchtime, I still don't think I've realised that I'm not going back. So I've had my last term, and the summer term is all about the kids. It has to be, because it's the exam term. So we've been doing in MFL, we've been doing speaking exams, then preparing them for the written exams, and then our exam classes go off, but everybody else still stays, and our lower school do their exams, and we mark those. And you kind of just get onto the treadmill of the summer term. And then there were all of the extras. There was sports day, there have been parents' evenings. Other schools are going to have their activities week in the next week or two. The summer term is full of stuff. And so you don't really have time to sit down and internalize it. And I say this as somebody who had to give a full old term notice. I had to give the summer term as my notice period. I don't know how those of you who kind of resigned at half term and are now just about to leave, I don't know how you've managed to kind of internalize the fact that you are leaving. Because that's an even shorter amount of time. So I came into this week and I kind of started delivering my last lessons. And what I thought would be quite interesting would be to record my thoughts as we went through the week. Now, unfortunately, I only managed to do this up until Tuesday, because Wednesday was when everything kind of got a bit real. But I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But for now, here is kind of what I was going through. Here are my thoughts on Monday and Tuesday of this week just gone. So that's the 1st and the 2nd of July. It is about 6 a.m. on Monday, the 1st of July. Very satisfying, I always find, when a month starts on a Monday. And I've just had this idea for this week's show. So while my coffee is percolating, I'm going to tell you about it. And then I'm going to try and make a note not to tell you all the same stuff in the introduction on Saturday morning. Otherwise, it makes everything redundant. But this is my last week at my school. So I thought it would be quite a good idea to just record my thoughts as we go through the week. Mostly for posterity, I suppose. I've been at my school 12 years. It's the longest that I've been in any one school. And that's a long time. So I kind of want to record my final week. I have been journaling my final term, but I kind of want to record my final week just so that I remember. And also because when I did my show about interviewing,
back in March or April of this year. That was really well received. Please do go back and check that out if you haven't listened to it. And I did something similar where I was making notes through my interview experiences and kind of just talked you through them. But I think it would be good to live record the week as I go along, all the different stuff that I do as I get ready to say goodbye, so that if you yourself are leaving, or if you've got a colleague who is leaving and you've forgotten how that feels and you kind of want to get an insight into what they might be feeling, then yeah, maybe this will be useful. And if not, hopefully it'll be entertaining, because that's what I strive to be, either useful or entertaining. But for right now, I've blathered on enough, so I'm going to go and do my coffee and get ready for my final Monday. So it's about 7:30. I'm caffeinated, although I do need another one. I am showered, dressed. I'll leave in about 15 minutes. I walk to work, and it's about a 10-15 minute walk from my front door to my classroom door. But of course, it wouldn't be a Monday morning if the cat didn't come and sit on my lap just as soon as I put my fresh pair of black trousers on. The one who is currently sitting on my lap is the one that we quite often hear on the show, because she doesn't like being left out when I'm talking to you all, and she can hear me through the door into the studio. So yeah, this isn't really about leaving. This is just a bit of a memory, because of course, for at least a little while, I'm not back in a physical classroom. One of my new roles is as head of classics for an online school. And so I can kind of be casually dressed going forward, at least for a little while. So this meal, somebody at the door. That was the broadband man. I'm glad that he's come out. I'm glad that he's fixed everything. They clearly get an early start. But I now have to go to school. So I can't remember what I was saying before the broadband man came. But I am going to head out now, and I will chat to you all later. And that's Monday done. Had my last lesson with Year 8 today, and that was quite interesting. Bless them. So in my setting, I think like many schools do at the moment, all of our students do French kind of all the way through, from reception through Year 7, and then in Year 8 they're introduced to their second language, either Spanish or German. And it kind of occurs to me what a privilege it has been to be able to introduce students to the second language, particularly when it is German, because so many of them kind of go through like the beginning of their language journey, and sometimes they find French difficult. They don't get it. It's harder because they're encountering all of these linguistic concepts for the first time, and you then introduce them to German, in my case, and it's because it's a different language family. Some of them who have found French difficult really fly with it because they've found the language family that makes sense to them, or because they've finally had time to process all of those linguistic concepts that we were teaching them via French, and they're finding it easier now to apply them to German, and so they start thinking that German is easier, and so they have that kind of intrinsic motivation because they are believing that they can do it. So yeah, this is why I think that it is important for schools to offer at least 2 languages, because and 2 languages from 2 different language families as well, because I think sometimes it's really easy for people to go, I'm not good at languages, based on their experiences of whatever language they were trying to learn when they were 11, 12 years old, and kind of didn't understand the linguistic concepts because we don't learn about them in our own English sessions. And so to then be able to start something else from scratch and realize it's not so difficult after all, it's a really good thing. It's a really good thing. Tuesday. Today was a bit weird because today was transition day. And so it was like I had all these kids come into my class and I was like, yes, hello, welcome to my class. I definitely will not be your teacher next year because I won't be here. Which kind of, I don't know, does it defeat the purpose of transition day? Because surely the point of it is so that the kids get to know who will be teaching them the following year. I don't know. I guess it's something I've never really thought about before. I've always done transition days. All through my career we have had transition days. But I've never thought about the why of them. It was just, something we do. It was something that I did in school. I remember my transition days in school. And so I just kind of, when doing them as a teacher, I just carried on with, it's what we do in schools. But, yeah, it does seem a bit strange, particularly for the students who are coming into the school new. I met them for one day, I taught them one lesson, and I will never ever see them again. Which is, it's not really a big deal, is it, in the grand scheme of things, because it's not like they're going to remember who I am. They are highly unlikely to notice that the teacher they actually end up with was not me, and even if they do notice, they're not really going to care, because they want to know who their actual teacher is. But yeah, it got me thinking about what the point of transition days is, because I also think it would be good for incoming teachers to be able to participate in transition days. Maybe part of an induction program, kind of get to know the run of the school day, get to know the kids, get to know the staff, and just kind of have an experience of how a school works before they actually start. Now, obviously, that's not practical. In order for that to happen, transition day would have to become some kind of national thing where everybody did it at the same time, and somehow logistically we all managed to get to whichever schools we were moving to. So clearly that's not practical, but yeah, it just strikes me as a bit odd that these kids came and they had an experience of a lesson. Some of them, of course, because it was French and because they were the year sixes transitioning into year seven, they'd not done French before, so it was a brand new subject with a brand new person, and then that person is not the person who's going to teach them after all. It was much easier, I think, in primary school, because of course you are just the class teacher and you teach everything. So no, I just said just the class teacher, and that's not what I meant. You are the class teacher. You're the only one that they kind of have to really worry about transitioning to, and so that's a little bit more straightforward. Yeah, an odd concept.
God, listening to myself always makes me realise how Gloucestershire I actually am. So that was Tuesday. The project kind of fell apart there because Wednesday was when everything kind of became real. Wednesday was possibly one of the weirdest days in my teaching career. I think because emotions in my department were heightened, because I'm not the only one leaving. There is a colleague of mine, a colleague and a very good friend of mine. She has left too. She has also gone on to a head of department role. And Wednesday was her last day. And so in our department, Wednesday kind of became the goodbye day. It was easier just to kind of to say goodbye to both of us at the same time. And So yeah, that was really strange. We met at lunchtime. I was given some very beautiful gifts of stationery. I've got so much stationery now, which is not a problem. Which is not a problem. You can never have too much stationery, particularly given some of the stuff that I am moving into in my portfolio career. All of the writing that I do, I can never have too many writing implements, too many notebooks, too many journals. So I'm very grateful to my colleagues for that. But we had that, and then beautiful words were said about me and about my colleague, and it was just weird. It was just weird because for her, of course, it was the last day. Because it was her day off on Thursday. And then she was in her new school yesterday to do observations and things. And so, it was really sad kind of saying goodbye to her, because she was one of the first people that I was introduced to at my new school. And I tell this story all the time, but our then head of faculty, the head of languages, then said, she said, you need to make sure that you make friends with this person, because she is amazing and you will learn so much from her. And I did. And she is amazing. So it was really sad to kind of say those goodbyes, but it was also really strange because we were saying goodbye knowing that it wasn't actually goodbye, because she then WhatsApped me on Tuesday and on Thursday and again yesterday. So it was kind of like it was a goodbye in terms of we're not going to work together anymore, but not an actual goodbye in terms of, oh, I'm never going to see you again. And I think, because emotions were very heightened for our whole faculty on Wednesday, it just became a very peculiar day. And we all kind of, at the end of it, sat down and said, today was weird. Today was weird. So that's why I ended up not recording Wednesday, because it was weird. Thursday was actually my last teaching day. Thursday was very pleasant. For our French department meeting, we went out for coffee, which was very nice. We kind of had one last jaunt off campus together, and that was lovely. Then I went and I taught my Year 7 lesson. I say that I taught my Year 7 lesson. I didn't teach the lesson that I planned, because I had planned an actual proper lesson, and my Year 7s convinced me that they wanted to play games instead, so we did that. I regret that now. I should have just taught them a lesson. I should have taught them zoo animals like I had planned. But we had some fun. And I said goodbye to them. Did I have any other lessons on Thursday? No, Thursday was mostly making sure that my classroom had been completely cleared out. So that was Thursday, and that was my very last lesson in the school. Then there was yesterday. And again, yesterday was very strange because I had no lessons. We had final assembly, and this is the week on the timetable where I only teach period 1 on Fridays anyway. So period 1 was final assembly, so I did that. I turned in my lanyard to HR. Well, actually, I put it in HR's pigeonhole, because I didn't particularly want to walk all the way over to the HR building in order to turn it in. So I did that. I cleared out my own pigeonhole. I gave my tablet back to ICT, and I left. And it was weird. And I think it was weird because I'd already said goodbye, because we'd said goodbye on Wednesday. And then we'd had 2 days together. And then I said to somebody that I bumped into, yesterday morning, because he asked whether I was going to go to like the leaver speeches and all of that, and I said no. I didn't want to make a speech. I didn't want to have a speech made about me, because weirdly enough, the people that I would think to say goodbye to are the people that I don't need to say goodbye to, because they're the people that I'm going to stay in touch with. And I think that's one of the strangest things about teaching, because you do become artificially very close to people. It is a lot like when I was in the theatre full time, and you would get very, very close to your troupe very, very quickly, the people that you were in a show with very, very quickly, because you were going through this very intense experience with them. And it kind of seemed world ending when the show finished and you would never see these people again. But then you would wake up on the first morning of not having a show and everything would be completely normal, because the ones that you had actually bonded with, you were still in touch with, and the ones that you had kind of, I don't know, trauma bonded with, I suppose, they didn't need to feature in your life anymore. And I think teaching is the same. I think one of the joys of it is the we're all in this together mentality, where, you know, you are working so hard to do what's best for the kids. And you've got all of these kids in common, and so you talk about them, and you talk about how to get the best out of them, and how to arrange your lessons so that they are exactly what Johnny needs in order to access the curriculum, and all of that sort of thing. And so you feel this very intense bond to these people. But then when you step away, you realise that there was a very specific group that you did have an actual bond with. Probably the ones in your own department, because they're the ones that you spent the most amount of time with. And then a few others that you found you had things in common with. But then a lot of the people were just, not just, because again, that seems like it's undermining it, but a lot of the people were, you are somebody that I went through this experience with, and I will treasure that experience, but now it's over. And for me, as somebody, like I said at the top of the show, I'm a very sentimental person. And I think that can be sometimes very difficult to accept. It can be hard to accept the fact that you're not sadder about relationships ending, about moving on, than you actually are. Let's also be realistic that in 2024, we are all connected anyway. It's not even like 10 degrees of separation anymore, is it? It's 0 degrees of separation. I am social media connections with pretty much everybody that I have ever worked with. And so goodbyes when you leave a school are not really goodbyes. They are, of course, to the children. And, you know, that can be sad, but that's going to happen anyway, because the kids are always going to move on. It's the staff body that is the constant in a school. And so, you know, you kind of say these goodbyes and you make these speeches, and it's all very, very sad. And then you wake up the next morning and you text your friend because she's got a pickleball tournament and you want to wish her good luck. And you realise that just because you're not working together anymore doesn't mean that you are not part of each other's lives. And I think that is also something that's very important to take forward. I read a tweet yesterday from somebody, not a teacher, at least I don't think he's a teacher, but he said, you know, how do you maintain friendships in your 30s? Because texts go unanswered and, you know, it's really, really difficult. And I think, you know, sometimes we do rely on our workplaces to forge our social relationships, to be responsible for the vast majority of our social relationships. And so I think sometimes we can fall into the trap of thinking that when a work placement comes to an end, that's going to be really sad because this forced interaction with these people is going to go away, and so you're never going to see them again. And the thing is, you might not see them again, but it becomes then a choice, doesn't it? It's a bit like when we're in school and we have proximity friendships, when we ourselves, our children, we are best friends with our best friend, not particularly because we've got anything in common, but because we sit next to them in maths, or because they live across the road. You know, it's just because we are close to them, and you make that bond. And it's then the same in the workplace. But it is possible to stay in touch with people. It is possible still to see them. It is possible still to go and get coffee, to go out to dinner, whatever it might be. Maybe, obviously not every day. You won't see these people every day anymore. But you can still see them. And I think, again, as somebody who is very sentimental, that's an important thing for me particularly to keep in mind. So that's been my last week. That has been my last week. It's been strange because, like I said, I still don't really know why I left. It was kind of one of those spur of the moment, now or never decisions that I really, really hope I don't live to regret. But I am also aware that there are always going to be jobs. There will always be work. I am in a very privileged position where, you know, I don't have any dependents. All of my family is in this area, but you know, I could move if I needed to. If whatever is coming, if my little portfolio of options doesn't pan out over the next few months, I can get another classroom teaching job and I can rethink my career plan. And I don't take that privilege for granted. Because not everybody is able to do what I've done. Not everybody is able to leave their job without really knowing why they're doing it. And not everybody is able to do as I did and leave their job without actually having something else to go to, and then just hoping for the best as you went to different interviews. So I accept that. And it's exciting, I think. I know it's scary. The unknown is always scary, but I think it's exciting. And one of the things that I'm most excited about is being able to share what's coming over the next few months with you all here on Saturday Morning Breakfast. Because let's be honest, if I crash and burn, that's going to make some really good content. And if I don't, then maybe I can be a little bit of an inspiration, which is, as a teacher, what all of us want after all.
Hi teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org. Imagine having your own instructional coach available 24/7. Now you can with the Teaching How-Tos platform. This highly personalised social platform empowers busy teachers to learn and apply evidence-based teaching techniques, either independently, working collaboratively with their peers, or with our new AI assistant. The platform features over 160 visual guides to teaching techniques, designed to help you quickly and easily implement high-impact practices that boost student engagement and improve learning outcomes. Join over 200 institutions worldwide that are elevating their teaching practices with the How-To app. No gurus, just practical support anytime you need it. Interested in finding out more? Visit teachinghowtos.com and register for our next webinar.
Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Watch sessions by thought leaders in education, literacy experts, and EdTech specialists from the International Reading Conference for free. The lineup included renowned speakers such as TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui and beloved children's author Michael Rosen. The three-day conference explored a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Sign up to receive the recordings for free by visiting the Reading Solutions UK website at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
This is your Teachers Talk.
Tim texted in there during the adverts. Good morning to you. Again, as I always introduce Tim, the longest term friend of the show, my very first and very second guest, because that was what happened last time I tried to switch up what was in the studio, was that we couldn't get it to go right. That was why I was so nervous when I was changing things around this morning. But Tim says, so much of what you're sharing resonates today. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for that. One of the things that I love about being here at Teachers Talk Radio is being able to share. As you know, particularly friends of the podcast, of the station in general, not just of me here on Saturday morning, you will know that I'm one of the few hosts who makes his show all about him. Most of our other hosts, they have different guests coming on to share their views, but I pretty much just do my own thing here on a Saturday morning. But I think that personal stories from teachers are so important. And I think sometimes it's really easy to get caught behind the professional bravado and to pretend that everything is always shiny and wonderful, or conversely, everything is always the end of the world, because you create that professional persona and you don't want to deviate from it. But I think one of the things that we here at Teachers Talk Radio in general do so well is giving voices to the individual stories, because it is from individual people that we learn. And that's kind of my personal mission statement here on a Saturday morning, is just to share my experiences with you and hope they resonate. So thank you for validating that, Tim. I really appreciate it. One of the most joyous things about my new job, two of the most joyous things about my new job, I suppose, is that I'm staying in teaching, which means that I can still be here with you on a Saturday morning. I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit scared when I resigned from my post without another teaching job to go into, because I thought I can't host TTR without being a teacher. That's not the point of Teachers Talk Radio. So, you know, when I got my head of classics role, which meant that I was staying in teaching, I was delighted with that, because it means that I can still be here with you. And it also means that I can, from the middle of August, I can be here with you again pretty much every Saturday. So as you will have noticed, this academic year, Saturday morning breakfast has been a little bit spotty, because it has worked around my teaching schedule, because in an independent school I have been teaching on Saturday mornings, and I was reluctant to give up my Saturday morning slot, because I do love having breakfast with you. But from when I get back from the States at the beginning of August, I will be with you each and every Saturday, barring the time that I may need to take off, of course. But yeah, I'm really, really excited to come back and to be with you every week again for breakfast. I've got some really interesting shows planned for you. So I will leave you here, and I will leave you with good luck if you are finishing up your school year over the next couple of weeks. Congratulations if you've already finished. Good luck if you are a school leaver, if you are moving on to somewhere different in September. Enjoy the last few days, weeks, hours, whatever it might be with your current colleagues. Say your goodbyes. Don't say anything that you might regret. And don't not say anything that you might regret not saying. Make sure that you know how important your colleagues have been to you, because that's the most important thing of all, in my opinion. That community, that coming together is the most important thing. Have a great rest of your July, everybody, and I am already counting down the days until that second Saturday in August when I will be back with you. I will see you soon. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.